Welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today. This is the fourth week of our session, and what a month it's been. So my name is Lorraine Charles. I'm the Executive Director of NAMO, and we're one of the co-hosts of this Migration Summit. I'm so excited to have you here today. The Migration Summit 2022, organized by MIT Refugee Action Hub, REACT, NAMO, Quran Foundation, Paper Airplanes, the MIT Abdul Latif Jameel World Education Lab, JWEL, is a month-long global convening designed to build bridges between diverse communities of displaced learners, universities, companies, nonprofits, and NGOs, social enterprises, foundations, philanthropists, researchers, policymakers, and governments around key challenges and opportunities for refugee and migrant communities. This year, we're exploring the theme of education and workforce development and displacement through virtual events hosted by participating partners around the world. Today, the panel, Employment Rights for the Displaced, How to Make Work Fair and Safe for Refugees. As you know, NAMO, this is what we do, remote work for refugees. This is a very passionate and close topic to my heart. And I've been trying to get people to talk about this for a long time. So I'm really excited to have us all here today. As we know, the majority of refugees, 70%, live in places that restrict their rights to work. Digital work has been seen as a grey area, one way for refugees to find work. After all, the digital space, especially remote work for foreign companies, freelance and platform work offers a compromise, offers the promise of democratized employment opportunities. While digital work is perhaps the most nascent form of employment for displaced people, more traditional employment is still more common, yet without equal access to formality. This is exploitative. The hope of digital work can lead to more decent work for refugees. Essentially, the issue is not whether digital work is preferential, but how could refugees be allowed legal access to employment in their host communities? The Temporary Protection Directive that has come into effect by the EU after the Ukraine crisis has allowed them to have legal access to employment within the EU is an example of what can be achieved if political will is present. This means that Ukrainians would work and not be subjected to informality that other refugees have faced and continually endure. The main overarching question this panel seeks to address is how can we guarantee that all refugees have equal access to formal and decent work? Welcome our moderator, Lye, who's Executive Director of DDN, who's based in Dublin, and he's going to introduce our really esteemed panel, who I'm really excited to have here today. Lye, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lorraine. Welcome to everyone. A very, very interesting panel. I'm Lye Ogunsanya. I am currently the Chief Executive of DDN IPAS. And we do exactly what it says, International Protection Applicant Services, meaning we accommodate families, and also we really go out of our way to ensure that the wraparound supports are there for families and to ensure faster integration and faster moving on into the host community. Now, all of that, of course, involves education, health, and what we are talking about today, formal and ethical jobs. I would jump right into it in terms of introducing our esteemed speakers today. Paola Pace, Deputy Chief of Mission and Senior Regional Project Manager for the International Organization for Migration. Hi, Paola. Filipa Matos, the VP of Special Operations at Remote. Jina Krause-Vilmar, President and CEO of Upwardly Global. Zulum, Avila, who is a specialist on employment strategies in the digital economy for the International Labour Organization. I will now pass the floor on to my esteemed panelists to talk about themselves and talk about their work. You have 2 minutes each, please. We'll start with Paola.
Thank you, Lye. Thank you, Lorraine, for inviting me today. I'm very excited to be with you to also discuss a theme that is very close to my heart. I work for the International Organization for Migration for 17 years. I've been based in headquarters, but also in Kenya, covering 11 countries in East and Southern Africa. And for the last 5 years, I'm based in Tunisia, covering Tunisia as a deputy chief of mission, but also working on a migrants integration project in the 5 North African countries. So I have a lot of experience in migration issues, and I've studied law and public health because I like looking at the world from different perspectives. So I'm very excited to discuss these issues with you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paola. Filipa?
Well, thank you for inviting me to this summit and for giving me the opportunity to talk about remote and our experience through the Remote for Refugees program. I would like to highlight the importance of discussing employment rights for the displaced and how we can all meaning all, become enablers of access to dignified work for everyone. Actually, Remote's mission is to enable companies to hire everyone everywhere. But our mission goes beyond our business, and it's a call for action in today's world. So that's why we launched the Remote for Refugees program. While we were exploring initiatives with local governments last year, it became increasingly apparent that our service would be incredibly useful for supporting refugee talent who might be having a hard time finding local work, secure employment from overseas companies. Not only will refugee talent be able to attract dignified roles abroad, but they will be able to quickly contribute to their new communities if they can join our Remote for Refugee program, and we can take care of all the process. So we see this as a win-win-win for the employer, the individual, and the host community. And as a company that enables global employment, we feel that it's our moral responsibility to help refugees get back on their feet through dignified employment. So I'm looking forward to hear everyone in this particular discussion and to contribute as much as I can. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Filipa. Hi, everyone, everywhere. I love the sound of that, and this is really exciting. And as I'm sure Lorraine can testify to my passion for this. We'll move on to Jina. Jina, please.
Hi, I have spent the past 15 years working at the intersection of workforce inclusion, refugees, and gender. And really working with both at the policy level and at the practice level, and sort of seeing how those two spaces, how does reality impact policy, and how does policy impact reality? I'm now the CEO of Upwardly Global, and we are a nonprofit based in the United States that works with immigrants and refugees to help them access professional careers, including in the digital economy. And so nowadays, my work is largely with communities and employers.
Amazing. Thanks, Jina. Policy and reality. Exciting. Zulum, please.
Hi, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure being here with you. And thank you for inviting me to contribute to an extremely relevant discussion. I heard that you have been very busy over the past weeks, and a lot of interesting things have been said. I am connecting today from the headquarters of the ILO in Geneva. Basically, my work focuses on promoting employment strategies and the digital economy. And I am currently responsible for implementation of a very innovative project for the digital inclusion of refugees and host communities in MENA region and also in the East Horn of Africa. So I am really, really glad to be here in this panel today. Over back to you, Lee.
You're on mute. Lye, you're on mute.
Yeah, classic Zoom. Come on, we've been doing this for what, like 3 years now? Of course, somebody's going to go on mute talking. Thank you so much, Zulum. Refugees and host community. Key word is the host community here. We often talk about migration and migrants, and many times we would skip that key factor of the host community and what we are doing to empower the host community as well. So thank you so much, Zulum. I think we move on now. We dive in. I think my first question I would direct to the International Labour Organization representative. Zulum, let's start with the definitions. Formal and decent work. How would you guys define what that means?
Thank you. I really appreciate that we can start this panel straight into the concept of decent work and formal employment, Both of them are fundamental building blocks of the ILO's future of work agenda. Allow me just to remind the audience today that since its establishment back in 1919, the ILO has developed a system of international labor standards, which aim at promoting decent work conditions for women and men. And indeed, the ILO is now the UN specialized agency for the world of work. In very simple terms, decent work are jobs that are productive, safe, that offer a fair wage, rights and social protections for when things go wrong. Workers in formal jobs perform works that are freely chosen in conditions of equity, security, and dignity. And while this may sound very abstract, ILO's feet are grounded on the real world. Now we are submerged in a very challenging context that has led to a sharp increase in poverty and informality. And indeed, today we are discussing a sector that has become characterized by its informality. In this context, our goal is to support governments, workers, employers, organizations, and others to ensure that minimum standards are applied, even in informal work, and that we work together on finding pathways to transition to formality. We are aware that this process is arduous and long, with many challenges in between, but this is what we do. In the ILO, we support the world of work actors to bridge the divide between informal and formal. And sometimes we start with small gains, such as removing the major forms of discrimination and abuse, like forced and child labor. So working towards decent work standards indeed takes time. And if I may, I would like to add a little bit on the context of the pandemic. This pandemic has confronted us with growing inequalities, and the efforts that the international community has made to improve conditions or to move the work into decent work have been also negatively impacted. Social protection is still a distant, it continues to be a distant goal. And also people are still finding a living in the informal economy, particularly those that are hosting refugees and forcibly displaced populations. And even in advanced economies, people have suffered from loss of working hours and income. Prior to the pandemic, let me just bring this figure, which is very telling. 8 in 10 young people were in informal employment or in poor quality jobs. And the pandemic is reducing even more the pathways to formal work for many of them.
Indeed.
And just let me add that the conclusion that we can draw from this rather harsh reality is that there are serious decent work deficits. People across the globe want and need a recovery that leads to a sustainable, a fairer, and a better future. And this is why decent work remains more than ever a major instrument to make development happen. This is also why decent work is at the heart of ILO's global call to action for human-centered recovery and also for the sustainable development goals. Over to you, Lye.
Great, thank you so much. And I mean, given this political reality, we know that 70% of refugees out there at the moment still have serious restrictions on the right to work. I'm going to move over to Paola. I would love to understand what the International Office for International Organization for Migration's experience has been, and knowing that, Paola, you have 17 years experience, I'm dying to get your take on what IOM's experience has been on this topic.
No, certainly, Lye, it's a complex issue, the issue of right to work for non-nationals. Refugee, first of all, because it's a specific categories of migrants who have lost the protection of their country of origin, had to flee. We know that they are like a smaller percentage compared to non-national who live outside their country of origin. They represent pretty much 10% of the migrant stock. So among international migrants, 10% are refugees, but that shouldn't, the number shouldn't make us overlook the fact that is a specific category of migrants who do need international protection because they had to flee, had to leave the country of origin because of war, generalized violence, many other reasons we know. But we also want to complicate our discussion a little bit. We also, and I've seen in my 17 years of work within this sector in migration, I have met a lot of refugees and asylum seekers who did struggle to find a job. So certainly I'm interested to also discuss with you further with the private sector how we can really use digital work in terms to providing opportunities for refugees and asylum seekers to enter the world of work. Then, as Zulum was saying, we need to make sure that though they are protected social security wise and to regularize this kind of sector of the economy that in certain countries is not at all institutionalized. For example, in Tunisia, digital work is not regulated, so but it can be a very good opportunity, not only for refugees, but also other migrants who I have met in my careers directly. And I would like to reiterate to all of us that there are not only refugees who struggle to find employment. You have other migrants who for legal or practical reason cannot return in their country of origin. For example, I can give you a very concrete example. You could have a victim of trafficking, someone who is trafficked transnationally, internationally to another country in order to be exploited, for example, in forced work. And the person would have a risk if she or he goes back to the country of origin, can have a risk to be re-trafficked. The person might not qualify for refugee status, so might not get refugee status, but still return is not an option. And the person finds herself in a country, maybe escapes the trafficker and still have difficulties to become self-reliant and not to fall within exploitation and abuse again. And this is only one case. There are migrants with health conditions that cannot be treated in the country of origin. Migrants who have family unit reasons for which staying in the country where they are or reuniting with family members elsewhere is the long-term solution and the best solution for that individual. So it's very important to realize that, like refugees, other categories of migrants cannot be lumped sum in one group. It's different people, different individuals with different needs. And it's important that when we discuss issues related to digital work, we look broader. We also know if we consider merely displaced population, the majority are those internally displaced. Even now with the last crisis, Ukrainian war, the majority of Ukrainians are displaced within Ukraine. They haven't crossed an international border. So it's very important to consider that. And yes, I've seen lots of migrants stranded in different countries, including refugees and asylum seekers, not being self-reliant and like recurring to dependence from humanitarian aid, although they have skills, soft skill, hard skill, they can bring a lot to societies, including in the country transit destinations / the gray areas in between the two. So and they just need to get an opportunity. And I do think also helping you answering this question from the Tunisian perspective, I do believe that digital work could also be a way for example, Tunisians to have to record to immigration as a choice, not out of necessity, because many of them would actually like to stay in their country of origin, but the condition of work here, like informal sector, is very rampant and salary are very low. So many of them with skills leave the country. So that you risk the brain drain when they would be willing to stay, and some do, and do manage to get some job in the digital economy, but because it's not regulated, they have difficulties, for example, to get their salary. And it would be the same for migrants, including refugees in Tunisia. It would be a challenge to receive the salaries from overseas companies overseas because of the very strict banking system. So in a nutshell, these are the things that I think we should consider going ahead in our discussion.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Paola. It's great to hear you talk about looking broader at the bigger picture in terms of the migration context. And also, I love your point about the fact that, you know, there are people who might want to leave or who might not want to leave. So having the option to be able to work where they are could also stem the flow of migration, from what I'm hearing from you. I will move on to Jina now from Upwardly Global. One question, what does Upwardly Global do currently to promote formal and decent work for refugees? Jina?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, work authorization is critical, right? Like working in the digital economy, working in a less regulated economy doesn't get around the fact that in order to have decent and formal work, you still need work authorization. So that's us keeping the eye on the ball. And that's the number one, that should continue to be the number one goal, regardless of all of these other opportunities that we're trying to find. The second piece is that even when there is work authorization, there's a huge informal economy. So to give you an example, 61% of workers globally, not refugees, workers globally work in the informal economy, right? And then you add on top of that, most of them are predominantly women, okay? So we're just talking about the fact that many economies rely on the informal economy to function writ large. And many people find themselves within that. So one of the things that we do is we act as intermediaries. And that's kind of critical. That social peer capital and accountability is absolutely critical, especially for populations that are vulnerable, that might not know their rights and or cannot or do not have the ability to enforce their rights on their own because of the lack of power and privilege that they have in that community that they may be living in. And so we support negotiation. We support not only providing people with the skills to be able to negotiate, but we also serve as holding our employers or the employers that we cultivate into this work accountable. The second thing I would say that's really critical in terms of ensuring decent work is working with employers. Part of this is employer education. Most employers think when they hear of a refugee, they think somebody who's unskilled, who is vulnerable, that needs a hand out, not a hand up, right? And so we have to really work hard on this narrative, especially as we're seeing this politicization of the narrative around refugees and migrants as being weaponized for political means. We really need to work with employers as well to help them address these narratives. And we have to answer their questions around, you know, what does work authorization look like? What are they legally able to do in order to tap into this talent pool? What are the benefits in terms of retention? Retention rates are really high with refugee populations. They're incredibly loyal talent pool. And then also to be able to gain their feedback so that we're being able to funnel that back to our job seekers or our refugee communities so that they're also more informed about what choices they have and how to be well prepared for accepting or accessing those opportunities. So I would say those are some of the things that we work on in terms of ensuring that how do we promote formal and decent work? Is you've got to work on the employer side, you've got to have that work authorization and enablement side, and you still have to act as an intermediary to ensure there's some protection mechanism that exists within these sort of social networks that you provide people. So what we call sharing our privilege.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Social peer accountability, very, very important. It's great to hear these keywords. Employer education as well. Nice to hear that from you, Jina. There's a lot of misconceptions of what a refugee expert is sometimes. So great to hear all of that. This big gray area that we have in terms of formality, etc. I would like to ask a question about how digital work really adds to the complication in this gray area that we're speaking of. I'll put a question out to Zulum in terms of Jordan, which is currently recently been given 200 million funding by the World Bank. And that's earmarked to provide access to use to freelancing platforms and to improve government digital services and digital payments. What I hear is that the project aims to generate about 10,000 new income opportunities for youth in the next 5 years, including women and Syrian refugees in the freelance opportunities sector. What's the ILO's view in the context of formal work and this grants or partnership with the World Bank?
Thanks, Lye. I think that these both questions are really complex and require a session of their own. But let me start by saying that with the rise of digital labor platforms, non-standard forms of employment have increased at a very fast pace. And this has brought renewed attention to dependent self-employment and disguised employment relationships. So very quickly, let me go into the matters of what makes a difference between a standard employment relationship, what we call the traditional forms of work, against this new, more flexible ways of working. First, there is not an open-ended contract. The tasks, the projects are very specific and usually attached to short-term or fixed-term contracts or project-based contracts. Second, employment is not full-time work. So you are on a call or can combine different jobs. Third one, and this is the most relevant, the traditional subordinate employer-employee relationship is not part of these new ways of working. Instead, there are other intermediaries that are bringing employment demand and offer together. And yes, indeed, gig work offers flexibility regarding work location, time, and variety of projects that people can take. However, the digital work and gig work can be ambiguous and exhibit high degrees of informality when the rights and obligations of the parties that are involved in that relationship are not clear. So these are disguised or where there are gray areas in the national laws. So I wanted just to clarify first that, so we can enter now into the other question regarding the example on Jordan, and yes. Because they are both linked. So for those countries who decided to take advantage of the opportunities offered by digital technology, it becomes fundamental to ensure these models are sustainable and bring positive change rather than exacerbating existing gaps. I think that it's all positive to see a strong commitment from some governments and development agencies to invest in harnessing digital technology, especially for job creation and for improving government services. However, this is not a linear process or a process that takes place in the same manner across countries. In each country, there are some particularities. For example, lack of reliable connectivity and access to computer and software still poses significant entry barriers to workers in low-income countries. Well, but let me just tell that ILO supports innovative employment and social policies, particularly if those address skill gaps and accelerate progress towards gender equality and the inclusion of refugees in the labor market, together with the host communities, for example. And one thing that is very interesting about the example of Jordan is that offers the opportunity for us to discuss on the importance of an integrated employment strategy that encompasses policies at different levels. So the different speakers have been touching upon, and in particularly those that stimulate the formal economy and increases the ability of those countries to absorb more people and create more decent jobs. So let's say that there are also some core capabilities that countries that are embarking in the digital economy need to secure. For instance, the quality of data that governments have to scale up their use of digital technology. Cybersecurity frameworks need also prioritizing in many countries. Transparent data practices, adherence to private policies are also fundamental, and sometimes there are important gaps. Limited infrastructure also to support data transmission, insufficient digital skilled workers, and accessibility to internet connection, as we just discussed. So the key in this question is how to make this digital transformation sustainable and linked to the principles of decent work. For us, for the ILO, it's necessary to involve all different sectors of governments. And this is what I was referring when we need an employment strategy that is also integrated.
Yeah.
So from finance, labor governance, technology and communications, education, environment, they all need to be involved. And we are also clear that it's not always easy for labor ministries, for workers, for the employers' organizations to find their place in these new approaches to joint up government initiatives. However, I think that it's really time to improve the policy mix and make more job-friendly and fair to all government and also the interventions by development agencies. And a very final point on this question, governments, the social partners, the development agencies, all of us need to be aware of the digital risk associated to connectivity when designing policies to integrate certain groups that are already facing vulnerabilities, sometimes and including most of the time, refugees, no? And so we are careful to not unintendedly increase their vulnerabilities and deepening inequalities. So I leave it like that, and I think that this is a crucial question what you came with.
Indeed. Thank you so much. That's a very complex answer, but it speaks to a playbook that's obviously in the making with what's going on in Jordan. I'm going to put a question to Paola, IOM. I'm listening to this playbook and in different layers of complexity. If they can crack this gray area that we're talking about, should other countries be encouraged to do the same now, or wait for that gray area to be cracked? Question, Paola.
I'm all for finding concrete solution to concrete problems. So we have people in front of our door every day. We have open doors, so we have migrants, including refugee asylum seeker who come to look for services. Of course, asylum seeker refugee, we would refer to UNHCR, but sometimes we do assist refugees and asylum seeker as well, in cooperation, of course, with UNHCR. So I think we need to work something out now, while we do work also in the adoption of policies, legislation, or in the amendment of existing policy and legislation. So for me, we need to do something right now, but with safeguards, like Zulum was saying. We cannot employ migrants, including refugees, in the digital world without safeguards, without making sure that they are not abused, exploited, without making sure that they are not, we have to make sure that they receive their salaries. And in countries, for example, Tunisia is one where there's a restrictive banking system, that's going to be challenging. But to every problem, there's a solution. So there are a couple of possibilities out there, for example, for the case of Tunisia, for making sure that people then, migrants themselves, can receive the salary if they are employed by a company elsewhere, let's say the US. But we also have to make sure that we work with the migrants towards documentation, because the person has to be at least residing regularly in the country where they are, which is challenging, certainly challenging in the country where I am at the moment, and in the region where I work at the moment, the MENA region. But it's not the only one. I was in East Africa before. East and Southern Africa are also not that advanced like West Africa is. On the contrary, in terms of freedom of movement of people, not only for establishment purposes, yes, for short travels, but not to be able to enter the country for medium and longer term in order to work there. So we are not that advanced in many parts of the world in terms of documentation, and all starts from there. Because if you are a non-national in a country, you need to be documented in order to reside regularly, not to be a risk of detention, immigration detention, and deportation. So the documentation is key, but there are concrete things that can be done with an individualized approach, following every single case and making sure that the person has the right documents, at least residence-wise, because in order to work with a company outside, they might be able not to necessarily obtain immediately a work permit, but yes, sometimes the residence is linked to work, but there are also ways around it. In certain countries, you could stay regularly, subscribing to a vocational training, so you could continue your education at the same time freelancing. But again, you will need to work on your residence permit. You need to work on the salary transfer and the social protection part. So I do believe that there are always concrete solutions to concrete problems, but we need to be creative and partnering together towards that goal.
Fantastic. And I'm sure this is what this platform is for, to get everyone's take and see how we can all move forward together in making things happen faster. A question for Jina. Oh, by the way, Paola, good shout out for the for West Africa, I guess, for ECOWAS, in terms of the freedom of movements, etc., and being able to perhaps take a playbook and test it faster in that part of the world. Jina, we've listened to all of this complication around the gray area. Can I ask you, how does Upwardly Global deal with the situation in the context of the gray area around the digital work sector?
So
Jina?
From a market perspective, the digital economy and digital jobs are jobs. So there's not a distinction in terms of that between traditional work and digital work. It's a job is a job from the market perspective. And I would say I really like Paola and Zulum's comments, because what we're really talking about is a third space, right? The digital economy creates a third space where the rules of the game are still being written. And because they're still being written, there's an opportunity to design them, but they have to be intentionally designed so that they don't create the things that Paola and Zulum were talking about, which were unintended harmful consequences, which recreate systems of bias and exploitation, right? And so there needs to be intentionality and accountability as this third space is being created. But the good news is it hasn't been created yet. No one owns it. So refugees can enter, women can enter, LGBTIQ can enter. Like, there is a space where it's not dominated by one group. So that's great, right? That gives us an opportunity. I would say for Upwardly Global, the digital economy, there's two types of jobs. There is the project-based work that many of us are talking about, right? So that is, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to go do some data visualization, or I'm going to do some data scrubbing for this specific concrete project. It's a 3-week project for Facebook, and I'm going to get X amount of money for it, right? That's a project-based work. For us, we think about that as an opportunity to be building skills and experience that translates into a career. And that career can be long-term and it can be remote. One of the things that we've seen is that because of the rapid digitalization of our economy under COVID, we've seen a huge shift to remote work. And we've also seen huge labor shortages in a lot of places where we need people. And so there is an openness, especially with the Ukraine crisis, to be thinking about what can remote work from the employer's perspective play into in order for us to be thinking of refugees as an untapped talent pool or a non-traditional talent pool. So that's great. So I would say, I think we can aim higher. I think we can aim towards how do we use this project-based digital economy space to be investing in skills. And I want to be frank, one of the things we're going to need nonprofits and workforce development partners for is that this is continuous learning. Technology changes every day, it upgrades every day. You're going to need to continue to build on those skills if you want to continue to be marketable and relevant. So this is not a one and done. This is not you get a skill in order to make a specific handicraft and then you can sell that handicraft on the digital marketplace. This is something that has to be continuous. So that's one thing that I think needs to be a reality check for us. And that's why we're going to need also that as part of the infrastructure. And I love, Zulum, your comments about we need to be building infrastructure. We need to be building with countries as an incentive for them to be opening up this space to other non-traditional talent pools, including refugees and women. And how do we sequence that incentive structure so that it continues on through in a sustainable way? So I think that's really, really spot on. But I would say from the market perspective, employers have a huge role to play in helping to create that incentive structure. And in order to do that, we need to get them on board to be thinking about how do they engage in this talent pool. So I'll give you another example from Jordan, which is Western Union did a project where they actually hired project-based graphic designers from the Syrian community in Jordan to do work. Now, when they started that, they didn't believe that the quality of that work would be sufficient. So they really saw it as a humanitarian project. They did not see it as a market-based employment project. And what they found is that the quality of these graphic designers was so good that they initially had designed it where they would contract out the work, then they would hire a real graphic designer to redo the work, and then they would have the project completed. They realized they didn't need that intermediary for that quality control. And I think that's really important. And this is what I'm talking about, the education for employers is employers need to be educated about this talent pool, what the opportunities are, but we also need to create a space and a leeway for them to understand and get comfortable with this talent pool. And so a lot of the programs we do with our employer partners is very much about how do you create an internship or a midternship in the digital economy that allows you to understand and assess the quality of this talent pool and get them to a place where you know how to plug and play with them. And that's a journey.
Fantastic. That's a very, very good example in terms of Western Union and the assumptions and the reality. Filipa, hiring everyone everywhere, private sector, I would love to get your take. Remote started a program, Remote for Refugees, highlighting that companies want to hire refugees to work in the digital economy. Can you just talk to us about the legal requirements for companies who might want to engage with this program?
Of course, and the legal requirements are exactly the same for all of the organizations that want to work with remote. And this is because we want to show to everyone that is part of the workforce, being employers, employees, that the experience should be the same. We're talking about work for everyone, everywhere. So we don't want to, complicate a program, but we want to protect employees. So whenever we have very strict and very careful design KYB processes in place for all of the organizations that are working with us, being employing someone in a particular country, as well as someone that wants to hire displaced talent in a group of countries. So the process will look the same. So we can encourage more and more customers to, okay, so you want to hire 5 people in this particular region. Have you conceived that this displaced talent pool that you can also find amazing talent there, so we can push this and show them that the process will look the same. So in terms of legal requirements for remote, we are applying exactly the same requirements, being part of the program or not, which is really, really important at this point, because as Jina was mentioning, it is about education. There is a long way that we need to go before we can get employees to understand a bit more about the benefits, the potential, the growth that they can, pursue here in this amazing talent pool. So instead of just seeing the global talent pool as boxes, different boxes like regions type of boxes or types of background type of boxes, we should see them as an all. Right? And including displaced talents. So whenever we go and talk to particular companies that want to join this program, they will go through the same process. And that's actually a quite common question from them. It's like, oh, okay, so I would love to get into the program. Do I need to do something special? Is it very complicated? Do we have a term? Do we have something else? No, so it's very easy. We want to do this as a great experience as possible for you and for the employee that we're talking about here. So because we want to focus on the experience, we want to make sure that you know the support that we are expecting from you and the employees expecting from you. We want to make the process as simple as possible, so it will be the same. It will look the same as for anything else at remote. So by showing that everything looks the same, they don't think like, this is going to be super complicated, I will have certain conditions. No, it is the same that remote does every single day, but for free, because we want to support this cause and we want to make work accessible for everyone everywhere.
Fantastic. Jina, I'll just bounce back to you quickly. You gave some very, very cool examples in terms of what Upwardly Global has been up to. I want you to dive in more just slightly in terms of a global perspective and your activities around the digital economy and with digital work. What can you tell us? Just tell us a little bit more about what you guys have been up to globally.
Yeah, so for us, so we work in multiple industries, not just the digital economy, but the benefit of the digital economy is it's less regulated. And as Filipa was just saying, it's skills-based. So that means you don't have to come with a bachelor's degree and a credential in X typically, unless you're working in Germany, for example. But typically you don't need to come with that in order to get a job. So that's one benefit for us. The other thing is we do focus a lot on reskilling and upskilling. So we work with talent to understand where is the market. We do spend a lot of time understanding the labor market, understanding what those career pathways are, because for us, it's not just about that first job, it's about the journey. And we also know that actually most times gig work is not a sustainable livelihood in terms of it doesn't necessarily pay enough to afford the cost of living. So I'll give you an example. We had a partner in Ecuador that was working with Facebook actually to help train refugees, Venezuelan and Colombian refugees. Now the benefit of Venezuelans is it's a highly skilled middle income country. So you have people who have language and skill and helping them reskill or upskill into doing project-based work for Facebook. But the reality is the money they were getting and the amount of projects they were getting, because they were so discreet, wasn't enough to actually help to fund their cost of living. So it was a supplemental income. So for us, it's really important to understand like, what are the skills people need? How do we help them reskill and upskill in that? Oftentimes we'll also provide mentors. One of the most important things is for people to understand this space and this industry and not feel like they're alone. So having mentors that are working in the same digital economy or the same jobs is really important to demystify that and help ensure engagement. And then we help actually link them with employers. So they are an untapped talent pool for us. So we work on the employer side around the education, and then we also have talent partnerships with employers to help these individuals get into jobs. And usually that's where our position ends. Our goal is really full-time permanent work. So that's how we work with our folks, and that's because like we want you to be doing project management at a company, or we want you to be doing AI, or we want you to be doing data scrubbing or whatever it is. And so that's the sort of service that we provide that helps us lead to success. And we find that you know, on average, you know, in the United States, for the refugees we work with here, on average, they earn about $65,000 a year. And if you reskill in technology, it takes about 3 months to get a job. It's a very hot market.
Amazing. This
so
is
it's absolutely doable.
Totally doable. I mean, 3 months. Yeah. And it's great to hear of your work in Latin America with the Venezuelan crisis. I did some work in Colombia, in La Guajira and in Cucuta. So I really recognize what you're saying in terms of the wages, the wage packets, and then the cost of living. I would love to get a take from Zulum and Paola on this actual commentary. I would love to get your take. Maybe perhaps we start with Zulum. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, I fully agree that the employers and the private sector have a fundamental role to play in making of this digital economy, the digital space, something that mirrors good working conditions and also makes businesses models profitable and suitable to them. I just would like to maybe come to the question on this space that is not owned by anyone And I think that the fundamental question there is the lack of regulation. So while there is freedom, and those who are equipped with the skills, with the abilities, the knowledge, the information to navigate this space, there are great opportunities. But there are many for whom working on this digital space is just the only option. Especially sometimes this is the only option for those ones who are already facing vulnerability. For women who had responsibilities at work, for young people that are really looking for their first job, for making the transition from school to work, for older workers, because we think that gig work is only for young people, but the fact is that the ILO recent studies, there is the World Economic Outlook of the ILO that I invite you to look at, is dedicated entirely to platform work. And we are making more research regarding the gig economy, the composition, the extended, etc. So I think that is indeed crucial that we use labor market mechanisms and that we work, and this is the role of the ILO, and what I would like to also leave as a message in this forum, that the ILO is looking at solutions that seems to be really unattainable, because there is so much at the world happening right now. You know, the crisis in Venezuela, the Ukrainian crisis, the pandemic, how do you say, the ecological dimension of all this, that sometimes make us think that we are drifting away from this ideal or from the social justice goals and the decent work. But basically what we are proposing is to work with the different actors, governments, employers, workers, in building institutions that create an enabling environment and that also protect the employers for unfair competition. I mean, there are employers that are really investing and creating opportunities that are valuable to take, that offer a career, a perspective, a good salary, or good opportunities. And there are others who are operating in the gray zones and getting away from paying benefits, social protection, and using those gray areas for abusing workers. So I think that it's indeed important that we build these institutions together with the, building and strengthen them together with the international community, with the support of employers, of workers' organizations, and other stakeholders that are also present. So what I mean is what Jina said, all these labor market services that she referred to, access to skills training, job placement, career counseling, access to let's say, microinsurances, to good systems for payment that are efficient, good connectivity, etc. So this is what I was referring when talking about an employment strategy that help us navigate into the right direction and build up gradually. So over to you, Lye.
Major layers, major layers. Thanks again. I'm going to bring in the International Organization for Migration on all of this, and just to back up everything. Paola, any commentary on what we've heard so far?
Sure. For me, like I totally agree with the colleague, with Zulum and Jina. We certainly would need also the policies that mainstream migration. It's very important, both immigration, diaspora engagement, and immigration. And for us, what we learn along the ways, as Jina rightly said, even if this opportunity will not give the full self-reliance to the person in the first place, you still could have actors like UNHCR and IOM supporting partially at the beginning. But as Jina said, it's very important for the newcomers, so the migrants who arrive in a new country, who might have issues in terms of recognition of diploma and so on and so forth, to be able to find a sustainable source of funding for them to sustain themselves, their family, and often the family left behind in country of origin or elsewhere. So it's an opportunity to really make sure that those most vulnerable take their life in their hand and can be self-reliant and contribute more. But this also requires, and maybe that's something that we said at the beginning that I would like to reiterate, the change in narrative. As Jina was saying very well, people come with skills. It's not true that they are unskilled. It's not true that they steal the work of the local population. We have done an economic study in Tunisia showing the migrants increase the PIB per capita. So even in a country with unemployment, and this migrants economy study need to be really done in every country and regularly to really show, to make the business case about the benefit, also the economic benefit of immigration. And I also think maybe a missed opportunity sometimes is not considering diaspora links. For example, in Tunisia, we worked a lot with diaspora, not only Tunisians diaspora living abroad, that represent 12% of the population, so is a large part of the population, and is extremely vocal and engaged in the development of Tunisia itself, but also diaspora from migrant community who often steps in to support migrants, newcomer, when they arrive in the country of destination or transit, and they have difficulties in their daily life, victim of abuse and exploitation. So there could be mechanisms for newcomer to cope partially with digital economy, be able as to be a top up at the beginning, with the possibility to continue scaling up their skills and becoming a full income for them to be able to contribute best to their own lives and the country where they are and they come from. So I think it's this is definitely an opportunity.
Thanks, Paola. I'm going to keep you on the line. Great to hear you mention diaspora, another key word which I kind of think lack in a lot of these conversations globally. Diaspora is very, very important in terms of this digital framework or playbook that we're talking about. I'm going to zone into North Africa and zone into post 2011, etc., and the whole redefinition of what migration means in North Africa and perhaps in the African continents. Can you speak about the situation currently in Tunisia, where, of course, you lead the country office? What has been the response of the government? What do you hope for? And how can remote and the companies that work in this context support your current situation or mission?
In Tunisia, migration is seen from an immigration perspective. So government-wise, the government is interested to engage more Tunisians abroad in the development of the country and protect its national abroad. So immigration is the concern of Tunisia. And another concern the government has is about preventing irregular immigration, because Tunisians are the first nationality of arrival in Italy, and there have been a lot of incidents in the Mediterranean Sea that have also seen dead Tunisians and missing migrants. So certainly from the government perspective, immigration, regular and irregular, is the concern and the engagement of the diaspora. Less focus is given to immigration in the country. The numbers are not high. Tunisia, like many other African countries, has less than 2% of migrants in its territory, refugees being a very small number. So less than 10% of these, less than 2%. So we are talking about small number, more or less 60,000. That's the estimate on the basis of the census that was done 9 years ago, and some projections done by statisticians, so the UNDESA data. So we are not talking about big numbers, but certainly among the migrants in Tunisia, like in any given country, the majority come from neighboring countries. The first nationality is Algerians, and then Moroccan, Libyans, French, Italians, so like not far away countries. And then there's an increased number of Ivorians since Tunisia had the headquarters of the African Development Bank. That's when Ivorians started coming for employment purposes, and then they brought family members and so on and so forth. Tunisia is also a hub for international studies, but although the numbers of international students are on the rise, they are not increasing as much as they could because of documentation issue, because Tunisia doesn't see itself as a destination country doesn't have really a functioning immigration system that results in people falling easily into irregularity, including international students who are theoretically welcome, in practice often enter irregularity because they don't manage to obtain residence permit or don't manage to extend such residence permits. So, and then you have like migrant worker, those who are called interns, so those who enter for vocational training purposes, who can obtain residence permit, but with difficulty. So that's pretty much the scenario. It's definitely a different scenario compared to Libya, the neighboring country that has 12% of its population being migrants. The attention of the world is on this 1% of the 12% that is in detention. Certainly the situation of migrants in Libya is not easy, but Libya compared to Tunisia sees itself as a country of immigration. Many sectors of the economy are run by migrants too, being them Tunisian, be different nationalities from all over the continent and beyond. Tunisia doesn't see itself really as a country of immigration, like it's the case of Algeria, that's the case of Egypt. So in countries like that, for migrants, it's difficult to enter regularly and stay regularly. But the economic studies show us that even when there is unemployment, still there are sectors of the economy that don't manage to fill work shortages, and they don't necessarily find the skills among the national population. So certainly migrants are beneficials. We have done a study with the private sector also showing the gaps they need to fill in order not to close companies. But then we really need to work on this critical thinking of the local population, because we know that the economy is not sufficient. So strong economic arguments will not be sufficient for a government to open its borders to newcomers in terms of employment opportunities, because they will not look only at the economies, they will look also at the perceived or real capacity of the population to absorb the newcomer. They will look at hate speech, they look at xenophobia, they look at tension between communities, and here we have seen such tensions between national and non-national. Not only in the capital in Tunis, but also the center of the country, the south. So we have seen a raising tensions between communities because of the social economic situation exacerbated by the pandemic that has hit very badly also the local population, but also migrants. We have seen an increase in destitute migrants, an increase in unaccompanied minors knocking on our doors. So certainly there's a need to address the situation on the ground. So working with those communities, certainly with Tunisians, but also migrants, and that's what we do. We do work with Tunisians in difficult situations to give them opportunities, educational-wise, vocational training-wise, job-wise, as well as we work with the Tunisian diaspora in order to invest in the country of origin in lucrative businesses to increase employment and increase wealth. And we also work with immigrants on direct assistance and protection, but also the integration in the labor market. And this last area has been quite challenging, less for what concern like enterprises, like boosting existing enterprise run by migrants. More challenging has been working on employment in companies, for example. So the administrative burdens are quite complex to overcome.
So you know, stepping up to that, I will ask you again, and how do you think companies like Remote, and of course the companies that they work with, how can they support your situation? It sounds like a very complicated situation in Tunisia. Of course, are countries that often try to do the right thing in terms of migration and migrants and right to work, etc. There's always seems to be this clash between host communities and, of course, the migrants. What do you think companies like Remote and, of course, the companies they work for can do to support and to help your situation?
Not everybody is an entrepreneur. Like, although we said, as Jina said, many migrants come with skill, not everybody is a self-employed person. So the reality is that that's one of the mistakes that international organization, but also civil society and other sectors have done when working with vulnerable group. Also always like focusing on projects the person can run, but like how sustainable is that? Is it gonna go beyond the span of a specific program, a specific intervention? Possibly and often not. So the digital economy could help, because for those who cannot start their own business, or they are not willing to, or they don't have the capacity to do, nor they wouldn't be sustainable, and would help these people to find a source of income to go by and grow as a person and as a member of a community. So for me, this is the possibility, like the possibility to really give migrants, including refugees, a source of income in a sector of the economy that is booming, less regulated, maybe less bureaucratic, and still have the possibility of people getting out of poverty and getting out of abuse and exploitation, if well done.
Amazing, amazing, Paola. I'm feeling all those points, and I can see heads nodding. Filipa, what are companies saying? What do they want? Do they want to hire refugees? How do companies feel about the digital work for refugees gray area? Are they open to hiring refugees without the formality and recognition of their host governments? What would companies like to see? Filipa.
Hey, thank you. Well, before starting answering all of those questions, I would start by saying that the main reason why Remote is advocating for these type of programs like Remote for Refugee is because the way that we structured our organization was by setting up our own entities in all of these countries. So our role is to be an enabler for companies like, let's say that they are based in the US and they are looking for hiring displaced talent in West Africa. If we do have an entity there, what Remote will do is to facilitate that employment relationship. We're not supporting, when this is the case, we're not supporting like a contractor arrangement. We are actually presenting an employment agreement that it's according to the local jurisdiction. And we will be taking care of the payroll of that person. We will be taking care of the benefits, social protection, everything. So of course that, as we've been mentioning throughout this discussion, this is not possible in all countries because we don't have the regulation in place that would allow Remote to become the employer of someone that it's working to third parties, to another organization that it's overseas. So this is not possible in all countries. That's why at the same time that we are working towards these Remote for Refugee programs by promoting it with our customers to look for support from organizations, all of that, we are in parallel working with governments directly. And why is that? Because we can see here two main challenges. The first one is for sure the right to work challenge. And why? Because Remote and any organization actually, so here speaking from a private sector perspective, we cannot employ someone with the right to work. It's not legal, right? You cannot present an employment contract or run their payroll or get their social security and all of those things that are so important without having that right to work. So we are working alongside with governments, which is really, really interesting because even though we were reaching out to governments, we started to receive a lot of requests from governments to get our help in terms of our experience in their countries or other countries and how hard it is to legally work remotely from a specific country. So because this is, as we've been saying, it's a gray area. There is a lack of regulation, there is lack of understanding both from employers on what they should do, what is the type of talent that they can hire, should I hire in that specific country, can they work remotely, compliantly, what should I do, right? That's one. And then we have the employees that, if they are let's say, a refugee in a host community, they don't know all of these details, right? It's so complicated that how would they know? And the third one is the local governments. They lack an understanding of this new reality. And that is why I see with, at least some hope. This initiative, this proactivity from these governments to reach out to companies like Remote and some others in this area that can help them to understand from a global perspective the difference between the different countries, because we have entities in all of these regions. And we can see, like we are having this experience in this particular country and it's working. Why can we not take the positives of this experience and try to do something that would fit the needs of your own country? And we can support governments with this type of experience, but also not only from a regulatory aspect of things, but we can also bring the experience of our employers, their main challenges. Why are they not hiring in that particular country? Why do they need to support relocation so people can move from that country to other countries? Because they don't understand something there, or they have a challenge that they cannot overcome. And also from the employee perspective, why are not employees staying in their own country? Why are they looking to move to any other country, right? And if we look into all of these three perspectives, we can support with our experience, with the feedback, with direct information from all of this, I would say the stakeholders in this conversation, we can support with that information. That is why Remote, alongside with our work on the Remote for Refugee program, we are also advocating for better regulation that makes sense, that protects employees, being them displaced talent, being them a remote worker, working from another country. So then we all need to be protected to avoid gray areas where organizations that are not well intended can explore this lack of regulation by turning someone's experience into something that it's really bad. And we don't want that. Specifically when we are talking about displaced talent, right? They have been through so much that we want to even pay more attention to that experience, making sure that we are not, yes, we have here a job opportunity for you, so go ahead. That's not how we do things. We really want to make sure that this person is getting the support, that someone is taking care of their experience, that even if things don't work well in that particular experience, they will get out of there, but feeling that they win something in that experience, that they can move to their new adventure, that they have learned something. And that's how you get people into their feet again, right? It's by, not putting them aside in a different experience. It's by caring, it's by supporting them throughout the journey, not only from the perspective of, there you go, you have a job opportunity here, and now it's up to you. No, it's by caring throughout the journey. So when we ask ourselves, what are companies, looking for? Are they looking to hire refugee talents? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And I'm really happy to say this, just because I don't think that this was the reality a few years ago. I think even though we've been assisting to awful events in our world in the past few years, I think some of these events were call outs to action to a lot of our society's realities, being global workforce one of them. So I think, with the pandemic, organizations learn that they can hire everyone everywhere. They just need to have a system that works for them, because they were forced to make their companies work from other places than an office, right? So they can see now that the world is a huge talent pool, and everyone, if they are talented, location, it is not a skill. Background, your social economic background is not a skill. So if you have the willing, if you are able to take that adventure, then you should be granted the opportunity to apply for the dream job that you want, right? So companies are open to that, but they are not open to this just from how can I say, they are really looking forward to help. looking forward to get into this talent pool. They see the benefits. And I don't see this only from the moral aspect of all of this discussion, but also from a business perspective. They see the benefits of getting the right people to the right role instead of just hiring by location. So if they look for talented people, they can find them everywhere, independently of their country. And if they have companies like Remote, they can support them and make that employment happen in a compliant way. Why not? It's a no-brainer for them, right? But it's really interesting. And let me tell you a little example here, that an example of someone that was looking to hire in Nigeria. And they found this amazing person there. But unfortunately, the city where this person was based was lacking infrastructure. And how wonderful it is for all of us to live in a world where an organization offered to pay the rent of a new house in a city that could offer the infrastructure for this person to work for them, just because they could see the potential. They could see that this person was worth their investment, and they really wanted this person in their team. And this is so powerful that I think that if we can bring these examples to more organizations, they will feel inspired to do the same. I'm sure of that. And it takes just, a few steps for us to get into this. And I think, more companies are not comfortable with the gray area, which is really, really good, because they want to stay compliant. It's important for their business. It's important for business continuity, but it's also important because now the employee well-being, it's a really important factor. And it matters. It matters because if they want to continue to grow, they will need to hire, they will need to retain. And if they don't care about their employees, that won't be possible. So gray areas, it's not something that they are looking for. They are pushing governments to regulate all of these gray areas because it's really important for the sustainability of their businesses. So, when looking at all of these amazing opportunities that we have here, as Jina was saying, I can only see opportunities, but I think that everyone needs to get together and build an ecosystem. Because the thing is, if we just go as Remote to promote a program to a company and say, okay, don't you want to hire displaced talent? This could be really good for your company. We can promote this. But then if we're lacking the system that would enable right to work for these people, banking system in place, payment solutions in place, then they will say, okay, Remote, that's great. But if I cannot do it, what is the point? So we need to get together and we need to establish all of these things.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Filipa. I'm going to jump quickly. Before we move forward, I'd love to open the Q&A. So guys, if you can open up the Q&A. Jina, upwardly global and the gray area, and considering what Filipa just said in terms of collaborative approach to making sure we have a good playbook to crack this. What has been your experience in dealing with companies and their perceptions of the refugee area?
I think what I want to do is, and I'm so glad I came last because I got to hear all of these incredible women speak first. I want to connect some of these dots. So I think the thing is, Paola is absolutely right when we say we need differentiated services for refugees, because we've got refugees who are skilled or who can be reskilled, right? Because in order to work in the digital economy, you kind of need two things. You need language and you need digital literacy, right? And so and then you can be reskilled or upskilled into many other things. But without that, it's really hard as a foundation to be competitive in that economy. So we need differentiated services. So, when we're talking about the digital economy, it's a yes and. It's not to replace any of the other incredible things people have been trying to do to help refugees have access to economic opportunities, and to recognize that, we do enterprise development, even including supporting what I call survival businesses, which is people to earn enough in order to feed themselves. It might not be what we consider entrepreneurial in the West, but it's enough for refugees to be able to feed themselves, because honestly, that is probably their biggest challenge, and day one is food security. So we need differentiated services. Now, when we're talking about the digital economy, you just heard Filipa speak and say, actually, it's not actually gray. And it's not gray if you're thinking about scale. If you're thinking about trying to encourage businesses to invest and do all the things that Filipa was talking about that needs to happen, businesses need to reimagine refugee talent. They need to eliminate employment barriers. They need to rethink about how they do hiring and how they do recruitment. They need to not throw away somebody's CV because they have a gap on it because they've been living in a camp for 3 years. Like there's a whole education on the employer side, but in order to do that, and to have some scale with that employer or a set of employers, you're going to have formalization. It's not going to be a gray economy in that sense. And that can be good, but it also doesn't get to what we were hoping it might get to in some cases, which is opening up some more lucrative informal work that can be designed to be more regulated. So that's the other piece. I think when we're thinking about, well, how do we also then help those people who might have digital skills and want to work for a company in Kenya as a, Congolese refugee? That's really hard then to make those connections for an organization, because then you're starting to formalize that relationship, right? And so I think that's still the nut that I'm not sure has been cracked and can be cracked by any of the folks in this room. So just to be put that out there. I think from Upwardly Global's perspective, I mean, what Filipa says resonates. Filipa said it so nicely and beautifully, like there's a business case, and I just want to emphasize, there has to be a business case for an employer to engage in this journey, and then there has to be value alignment. And the value alignment can open up their horizon to thinking about the business case, or they see the business case and it could reinforce their desire to make sure that they're going through that. And part of that is because companies nowadays, they have huge incentives because of millennial workforce and millennial customers to make sure that there's value alignment, because that's an expectation. So I would say that deeply resonates with what we've been doing. And I would say that then the question is we need work authorization, yes. We need documentation, as Paola was talking about, yes. So that's part of building that ecosystem and having all of these people you brought here today to make sure those ecosystem pieces are being built. And then there needs to be infrastructure. There just does. People need to have access to internet, and they need to be able to access a laptop, and it needs to be reliable if they're going to work from it. And to one of the questions, there needs to be a way to pay these people. Now, there can be creative ways to pay people, refugees, that can go through like a nonprofit intermediary, but ultimately it's better if it goes straight into their pockets. But that's a non-banked community in large parts, so that can be hard. So I would just say, I think all of these dots connect, and it's a yes and solution, and it's probably an easier solution as we regulate it.
Fully understood. Thank you so much, Jina. Q&A, do you have any Q&A to my colleagues? Have we any questions at the moment?
Well, actually, before we go to Q&A, I want Blaine. I know we have a few minutes. Blaine, sorry, Blaine, to put you on the spot. Blaine is an Eritrean refugee in Ethiopia. I want you, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute, Blaine, to talk about how you're doing. You're working remotely. Can you talk? I mean, this is you're an example of what we are trying to do.
Excellent.
Firstly, I would like to begin by saying thank you for a wonderful session. You guys all are doing incredible work, and I hope that you could carry on and make real change and impacts for all refugees or displaced individuals all around the world. So as Lorraine explained, I'm an Eritrean refugee currently residing in Ethiopia and also working remotely through the support of both NAMAL and MIT React. So initially in the beginning, I located the work as an intern through the support of NAMAL, but of course the issue came through how would I get payment. So of course there are some restrictions within Ethiopia. Even though I do have the papers, refugee papers, but still there are issues regarding how you could get money from abroad. So for most refugees here, they tend to turn towards the black market so that you could get the money through that. So for me, of course, we were searching of like what organizations or companies are out there. In the beginning, I had some communication with Oyster, but initially they said that they didn't have an entity here. So that was the problem. And of course, while searching, we came across the WISE or TransferWise. It used to be TransferWise, but now it's WISE. So, and then when I tried to apply, of course, my country, my original origin country does not fall on the countries that are allowed to have that account. So I guess we had this long force and back and forth with the organization. I just kept telling that I do have a remote job, and I thought this might be a suitable way that I could get paid. And of course, for authentication purposes, you would need your original ID. So once I provided them with that, and they simply said they don't accept it, they more or less would only accept a passport or a driver license, so which I don't have. I only had the refugee ID. But then, of course, they decided to go with it. So currently, I get paid through WISE. So far, that has solved my problem. But I noticed that other refugees or displaced individuals still are facing the same problems. So if we can create a global solution, and as you said, there is a real untapped market within the displaced community, and everyone is willing to work. And everyone is looking for opportunities to work, be self-reliant, and then just an opportunity to apply themselves. So I thank you all. Yeah, thank you for a wonderful opportunity. All right.
Amazing. That's good to hear. Very realistic, very straightforward. I know WISE, I know TransferWise. I use it for remittances for my family back home in West Africa. So we are all on the same page here in terms of understanding the barriers and understanding how to perhaps climb this big whatever mountain we're going to call it. I have two questions. Am I allowed to pose these questions now to my colleagues from MIT?
Yes, go ahead.
So one question for Mikhail, actually going on your conversation, the last conversation from what we heard from my esteemed colleague there, what kind of documentation should be prepared in order for us to present ourselves to companies so they can build a trustful relationship with us as refugees? Question one. Anyone willing to take that question?
I can try.
Great.
Yes. So, Mikhail, thank you so much for your question. I don't think that, and let me know if this answers your question, but I think it's not a matter of trusting the refugee. It's all about being able to employ a refugee. So in that sense, we would need the right to work first in terms of that documentation. And that is why it's so important to push for something that can be just a little bit more simple than that, which is right to remote work. Why is this not a thing? Because if countries are so concerned about, their local economies being affected by, these job opportunities for refugees, okay, that's fair enough. Why can we not have right to remote work? And that is something that, let me tell you all, and I would love to get all of your support as much as we can. We are trying to push as hard as we can with all the governments and organizations, including the European Parliament. So we're trying as hard as we can to push for this idea. This would be tremendous. I know that it would not fix all the problems, for sure, but it would have such a great impact, and it would be the first step into the right direction. So yeah, that is something that in terms of documentation, that would be wonderful to have.
Incredible. Thank you so much. That's a very direct answer. And I think a lot of us will take up your call for the right to remote work. It's the future. Nothing's going to stop that. So we either get on board and make it happen, or we miss the boat. Resident Alam has a question or a comment. I'm not sure, but I'll throw it out there. There is this issue that comes to refugees most of the times. The host country blaming the refugee for a decrease in the economy of the country. This leads to unemployment and also disrespect. How can we solve this issue? Who's going to take this? IOM?
Sure. For many other things that can be done, but mostly is like reiterate facts, and reiterate facts, because evidence is out there that's not what refugees and other migrants do to economies. Neither refugees nor migrant workers are a weight on the host country. But like the evidence sometimes is weaker than myths. And we need to have, we need to continue restating evidence versus myths. And that's the same for what concerns health, right? Wealth for migrants is my specialization. Many countries do believe that migrants bring diseases and there are a burden on the health system, when we know that migrants are often healthier than the local population in the same socioeconomic circumstances, and the migrants do not bring diseases, and they underutilize the health system. Often they have a limited access to. So the reality is very different compared to myths. So the answer to your question is really an evidence-based approach to issues, including an evidence-based approach to migration, and also involving media and others in this kind of discussion, because they can influence public opinion, but we also need to work on the critical thinking of the general population for them to really believe in the evidence and international law and not in myths.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We are about to wrap up. I am going to just throw a spanner in the works because I'm getting a lot of notification about rounding things up. But one quick one, I really want to hear about the Prospects project. So Zulum, can you just dive in there and tell us a bit about the Prospects projects? And I think we'll leave it at that.
I don't think Zulum is here. She must have dropped off. I don't see her.
No, I put myself on the line for that. Damn.
I know, I'm sorry.
All right,
well,
cool. So I guess
maybe we can share a link in the chat. We'll share a link in the chat to Prospects.
Awesome.
Okay, so I will end it. Thank you. This is a fantastic discussion. It was so good we didn't get to our breakout rooms. That's how good this discussion was. Thank you, everyone. The right to remote work. I've been talking about this for a long time. Filipa, we're going to work together on this together. You know we are. Peter and I talk. This is what we're going to work on together. And and everyone else, please join us, because we feel that even if countries don't allow refugees to work in the local economy, surely remote work democratizes employment. The right to remote work, how can we push for this? How can we advocate for this? Join us in advocating for this. Thank you, everyone. Lye, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Paola, thank you. Jina, thank you. I want to speak to all of you again separately. It's been a fantastic discussion. Really excited. Thank you, everyone. Ramadan Kareem, Eid Mubarak coming up next week. See you all soon. Bye.
Bye.
Ramadan Kareem. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.